Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent experiences in business.
Learn what their cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Hey, welcome, cohesive leaders. We are so excited to have Jeff Price join us for this session. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. Happy to be on.
Awesome. Good. Well, we love starting off our podcasts and interviews with the same question. We want to know something that we can tell our listeners that is not on your resume, LinkedIn profile, or the About Us page on your website.
Right. Totally get that. I'm a huge movie buff, love music and movies both. And it's probably one of the reasons I got into the career that I'm in today. But that's really not listed anywhere on any of those profiles. So,
okay. So what movies?
Man, that's a good question. I have super eclectic tastes. So 80s movies, Back to the Future, Star Wars, the originals, Shawshank Redemption. You could run the gambit, but ththose are some of the highlights.
How about recent movies? Have you seen some of the new? Have you seen the new Jurassic Park Rebirth or Superman? Or
I took my boys to see the Jurassic Park movie. It was funny because we all had different feelings about that, because I remember being their age and watching the original Jurassic Park movie, and so kind of having come full circle with all that. It was pretty funny, but yeah, that one was interesting. I haven't seen the new Superman. That's still on my list to see. I haven't seen that one yet. So.
Yeah,
it's entertaining.
You won't be disappointed with any of those.
Nice.
The Jurassic Park one was interesting. I went through it okay, I know the storyline, but who's not going to make it? That's what you're going
That's what you're waiting to find out.
That's what you're waiting.
Yeah.
And
who's the character that doesn't make it?
These are actually horror films.
Yeah. Well, it definitely kind of took a bent back that direction, right? I remember the suspense from the original movies was definitely more like a horror movie. It definitely kind of swung back that direction with this one as well. Yeah. It was funny because me and the boys were talking about it they're all kind of the new Star Wars fans with the shows and everything on Disney. And we were talking about how the main dinosaur bad guy really kind of looked like it was possibly like some, amalgamation of Star Wars and Jurassic Park kind of all put together in one. So we thought that was pretty funny.
Wow. Yeah. Well, next question then is, we would love to know a little bit more about your identity as far as character traits or behaviors that you espouse to be, you say you are, or others say you are, or things you hope to be. So tell us who you are. Who is Jeff from a character description?
Yeah. So I think from a character description, one of the highest things on my character list is integrity, both in business and personal life. If you don't have integrity in what you're doing, makes it really difficult to do anything to scale and be successful and be able to sleep at night when you go home. So making sure that you do the right thing by your client, by your employees, by your families, having an integrity in those areas. In general, integrity covers all of that, right? So to me, that would probably be one of the highest ones. And I think most people would point to that, in conversations that I'd have with others. The other thing that I think is, from a character standpoint, is trying to look at situations through other people's lens. I don't know how to put that necessarily into I guess you could call it empathy, but at the same time, it's not really empathy. It's being willing to take a step back and look through a different lens in any given situation at that point.
Yeah, we actually do refer to that as empathy. Empathy is really having the discussion about what are people thinking, feeling, saying, or doing.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at it from that lens, you are trying to see it from their perspective. So it does have that empathy sort of aspect.
Yeah.
Totally. Now, when you mentioned integrity, I was curious, what are a couple of behavioral traits that you think are a part of integrity? So, it's like a big concept. So let's try to break it down into like what we would refer to like observable behaviors. What would you observe about a person who had integrity?
I mean, I think integrity and honesty are synonymous, and I think in any given situation, being honest in what's happening in the situation, whether it's your fault or somebody else's fault or whatever's going on, being honest and having those conversations, in a way that makes sense. I think beyond that, I think following through, I think is something that would be a big part of that. So if you say you're going to do something, follow through and actually do it. And I think that's one of the things that, especially in just in life and business in general today, I think that's something that is sometimes lacking. Just people actually following through and doing what they say they're going to do.
Yeah. And then how do you help measure or evaluate the concept when someone says under integrity that, do the right thing? So they'll make a comment, they'll say, do the right thing. So how do you know what the right thing is?
Um, for me, I mean, I'm always going to kind of revert back to, kind of my own faith position on that. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that, again, doing all things with honesty and kind of moving those things forward in a manner that makes sense, both from the standpoint of being honest, but at the same point, still trying to deliver on the things that you're doing. I think a lot of times we get caught up trying to do a thing or deliver a thing that we cut corners or we shortchange ourselves or we shortchange others. And that's where everything kind of starts to go off the rails. And, I mean, I probably, as we'll talk about later with the situations and things like that, again, follow through and honesty. I mean, sometimes that's going to cost you something. And in certain situations, it could be money. Some situations, it could be your job. But I had somebody said something the other day, or not the other day, but in a podcast I watched a while back, talking about core values and getting to the point of like core values don't really mean anything until they cost you something, right? If you're not willing for it to cost you something at the end of the day, is it something that you really believe? Is it something that you really stand for, right?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Kind of building that out. What are some of the roles that you have or that you perform, or some of the titles or things
Yeah.
like that in your everyday
And
work?
through the years too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So currently, I'm the CEO and owner for Communications Advisory Service. We're an audio, video, and IT company. I kind of came up through the ranks of the company over the last 10 years. I was the vice president before that of the company, kind of the second in charge there. And then in general, over the years, I've been in support positions from a technician standpoint for installs or design positions for designing systems, building systems. So it's kind of run the gamut. I started out as a support technician. My background was audio engineering. Went to school for recording and audio engineering, and then kind of got into what we do now.
So that means there was a buyout. So you went from vice president to now owner.
Correct. Yes, my previous boss, the previous owner. So just a short history about the company. The company started in the UK in 1980. Moved to the US when Enron had employed them to do some work at the Houston headquarters here in Texas. And obviously Enron, we all know what happened there. After Enron, the company stayed in the US, continued to do work for a lot of other oil and gas clients, as well as some other different companies. One notable being Men's Warehouse. We did some things for them a few years ago. When they were finished with all of that, we just kind of stayed and continued to do business with a lot of the oil and gas clients that we still have today. And so I started with the company about 10 years ago, rose up through the ranks, really had, a lot of good success with what we were doing from a support and technician standpoint. Grew the company, that the audio video side of the company to where it is now. Then went through and, the previous owner, asked me a few years ago, he's like, "Hey, would you be interested in taking over the company?" And I was kind of down for the challenge at that point. It wasn't something that I'd ever really thought about. But it seemed like kind of the next logical step for me, and started to grow into that at that point. And then bought the company, to your point, bought the company out September of last year. So
That's great.
It's incredible. I mean, there's so many questions I could ask there. We'd have a much longer time on this one,
Yeah.
but it sounds like this wasn't your trajectory. You didn't come out as an
No.
entrepreneur. You were a W-2, you were employee,
Yeah.
just growing. We'll unpack a little bit more of that at the
Yep.
later, but I just love hearing that was you were just growing and developing, you were doing a good job, and then your advancement at some point was, well, I gotta take over. So
yeah, so focusing on the thing that's in front of you, building the skill, learning how to do it, and then moving on to the next one. That's really kind of where my career path came from. This wasn't something that I said, oh, I'm going to own this company, so many years from now, or I'm going to own a company in general. That was never really in my lexicon. I was a W-2 employee who was doing different things, and like I always kind of look at things through the lens of how can I make this better? How can we make it more efficient? How can we do a better job? And all of those kind of things just started to build the case of, okay, just pick it up and take over the company and let's move on.
all right.
So Jeff, I do have to stop for just a moment to say I get grief when I use words like lexicon in my everyday language.
I say that word about twice a week.
I bet you do. Yeah, that's right. Your lexicon. That's right.
No,
Yes.
I love it.
Your vocabulary.
Yes.
Yes. So
Your two bag of words.
yes.
Right.
So segue from the things you wanted to make things better. Let's talk about when you made something worse. What was the that you're prepared to share?
Yeah, so we had a project. It's been a little while ago now, so the sting is a little bit less now. But we had a project that we started. We were a partner with another company. The other we were assuming, which is never a good thing. We were assuming that the other company was asking certain questions about the project and was getting us the information that needed to happen and some of those kind of things. And at the end of the day, we didn't get the information that we needed, and we decided to move forward without that information. And then at the end of the day, it cost us in extra parts, extra resource, extra time, to the tune of about $47,000, something like that, to finish the project. And that's, in a nutshell, it was basically making decisions without having all the information and not delegating the appropriate portions of the job to the team. And that was a learning experience for me, because again, these are all things that I have been learning as I have been moving forward, through the process and owning a company and building process and, getting on top of what we're doing. That, it's like you've got to lean into that and learn the lesson, whatever the lesson was.
Okay, so you really got to the heart of it there toward the end. Although it was a company issue, and that, let's talk a little bit more about you and how were you impacted? Because the listeners of our podcast are individuals in their late 20s, early 30s, who are working in an organization. They want to be an emerging leader. So we want to really drill down to them personally. Because oftentimes we can say, oh, in a company, oh, you didn't make a good choice, you lost money. Okay, so what? But let's talk about you personally. So how would you describe this experience for you?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like, halfway through the process for me, realizing that we're going to lose money on the project, but not only lose money on the project, we were going to pay to finish the project. It started to become a much different experience, because when you own the company and you're responsible for it, you're not just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for everybody else that's in your organization. And if you're making decisions to move something forward without thinking about the ramifications to the rest of your team, that's a huge issue. Part of it is also knowing when and how to delegate certain things. Folks in your audience, that are kind of in the place that you mentioned, I think probably they're all going to be at a certain level. They may have people underneath them. If they do have people underneath them, they need to practice the skill of delegating appropriately. So whatever that person's position is below them, being able to delegate those things down accordingly, and then follow up with them and make sure that they're getting done. That's one of the best skills that I think anybody would have. And from a personal standpoint, for me, one, it meant that the company was going to have issues from a financial standpoint. Two, for me personally, it meant that any kind of possible bonus or those kind of things was definitely not going to be there. And then from an internal view of myself and my own capabilities and my own thought process around some of this stuff, being able to think through this in a way that I learned the lesson internally and apply it internally and move things forward and put the systems and process in place in my own life to make sure that I'm delegating appropriately, to make sure that I'm having the right conversations that I need to have so that those things don't happen again. Right.
So where were you included in the process? Okay, so were you part of the fact finding and assumption making? were
Yeah.
you part of the only when they figured it out, you said, well, okay, we have to use integrity and move forward. So
Yes.
where were you in that actual process?
So I was in a portion of the upfront process, and I was in a portion of the implementation process, as well as making the decision to what we were going to do to fix the issue at the end. Ultimately, that was my decision to make the decision to move the project forward either way, and get it across the line, or go back to the client and say, we can't do this. We need X number of dollars more to finish this project, right?
What were the indicators to you that this was going to be an O experience?
Early on in any of these things, I mean, obviously, in the type of work that we do from a technology standpoint, nothing really ever truly goes to plan. Everybody can say that happens in projects, but at the end of the day, there is always something that doesn't work perfectly. And I'm somewhat skeptical, of folks that would say every implementation happens perfectly. There's nothing that goes wrong. Like there's no real way around that. So one of the things that we've had to start doing is making sure that, we've talked a lot internally about building flexibility into all of our systems and process, and the things that we're doing from a sales standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a resourcing standpoint. We always want to build in 15 to 20% flexibility to account for stretching and doing the things that we need to do, right? So even when we put a sales, proposal together, we're making sure that there is some flexibility in there so that we can, one, deliver and meet the client's requirements, but two, make sure that we have the ability to flex as needed and address those issues so that those things don't happen. Those things don't happen again. And if they do, you've already covered your capability to be able to rise and meet it, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really does. And you did talk a little bit, so we're just going to recap some of the
Mm-hmm.
cost. The cost to you. What was the cost to you personally? We already heard the cost of the company. What was the cost to you personally?
It's probably, I'm going to say $10,000 less, for me personally, of what I would have actually made, from the project. So in general, I mean, that's, depending on where you are, if you own a company, if, for your listeners' sake, I mean, if they're thinking about owning a company or those kind of things, these are all the things that, at the end of the day, you have to plan for. And there are times that you have to be willing to pay others before you pay yourself.
Mhm.
You know,
What about the cost of time or reputation, things like that?
cost of time. Yeah. I would argue that the cost of reputation, it probably helped us with reputation rather than cost us with reputation, because we did actually do the right thing and we did finish the project. We didn't think twice about that. We told them we were going to follow through and told them what we were going to do, and we followed through and did that regardless. So I think from a reputation standpoint, if anything, it probably helped us. Just to show people that, look, like, this is what we said we're going to do, and we're going to do it.
So that's external reputation. How about internal? So you were part of the process at the beginning that
Yep.
messed up, if you will,
Yep.
and you said it cost some bonuses. So how did that look internally?
Yeah, internally there we definitely had a review, and I owned up to that on my part and said, there are assumptions that I made, there are things that should have been different, that I should have dealt with differently, and I think across the board, our whole team, internally, we've had a lot of those conversations about projects. We had a few things with that particular project that we knew should have been different. And so we took a lot of time to kind of relook at how are we putting all of this together? How are we putting things together from start to finish? And we then at that point, we built in the process to kind of manage so that these things don't happen again. We've got a whole checklist of information that we sign off on now. And so internally, I would say that the reputation piece there is just a second guessing of decisions that we've made, right, in the short term. But I think the response, to what we did and to how we managed it, I think people, have come out on the other side of that, understanding that we are going to do the right thing, both by our clients and by our employees. So.
And how have you learned from this experience?
I think one of the biggest things from that is not making any assumptions. If you don't have the right information and you don't have the questions, or the question hasn't been asked, ask the question. Regardless if that feels silly, regardless if that feels, like, be okay with, being the one that looks like an idiot in the room, asking the, simple question or the question, the obvious question that everybody should be asking. Like, you've got to be okay asking some of those questions sometimes, because if you're not, you're never going to get to the actual true requirement of what you need to do.
Yeah. Now, I know you said you were a Star Wars fan. Are you a Star Trek fan as well?
Somewhat, yes. I have some very fond memories of going to some of the original Star Wars movies with my uncle back in the
Yeah.
day during the holidays and stuff.
So in the
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan, which is Star Trek 2,
Right.
Savick is the young ensign who questions Kirk in his decision making, and Scott starts to scold her, and Kirk says, "No, let her continue because he
Yep.
should know better and should be answering those questions." And so that just kind of reminded me a little bit of like the leadership lesson is, allow people who know information to contribute
Hmm.
to your decision making and
Absolutely.
be a part of it. And
Yeah.
and I know that you mentioned that you were looking for information. You decided you didn't have it, so you went on and made the decision for that. What were some of the factors that caused you to not hold up on the project, but to simply continue to move forward with it?
The timing of it was one piece. We were getting into a time crunch on actually meeting schedules
Hmm.
and getting things moved forward. Another piece was it was a relatively new partnership, and it was a relatively big job. So we didn't want to endanger any future work. So we rather would move it forward. The other thing that we looked at internally was, the the project was sizable and it was big enough and it was of a certain type that it would have been great, or it has been great. I shouldn't say it would have been great, but it has been great for some of the marketing piece that we would have needed to say, hey, we've done this work, we've done this type of work, those kind of things. Um, those are all probably rationalizations of like making me feel better about spending the money, right? But at the same time, like we're trying to kind of look through those lens of, okay, yes, we made a mistake here. Yes, we are going to fix it. But what's the lesson that we learned, and how can we, frame this in a way that makes sense for us moving forward, right? And
Yeah.
to get the most out of it.
I want to go back to the so you did a review, you owned up to the team. My
Hmm.
guess is that you were in person and not you didn't send out an email to them, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
talk about how those feelings of owning up to that mistake and the choice you made, pitted to where we have integrity. Like how did you handle that call
Yeah.
out itself?
Yeah. So I think, I think the big piece of that in leadership and, being in a position like this, you've got to be willing to own those things. You've got to be willing to have those hard conversations with people. Because the more that you're able to do that, people will trust you to the amount that you're willing to be vulnerable and honest with them, right? When you are more forthcoming and when you are more, not more honest, that's not what I mean to say, but when you are honest with them and when you are, telling them, look, I screwed up. This is what happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. Generally, 99% of the time, if I have ever had an interaction with a client or with somebody in my personal life, and I have owned up to a mistake and I have told that person or those people what we are doing to fix it or what I am doing to fix it so that doesn't happen again, generally people understand that you learned the lesson, you've seen what the issue was, and you're willing to open up and be honest with me and tell me what the situation is and move forward, right? That to me, I think is the paramount piece of that. If you're not willing to own up to it, and you're not willing to move things forward, at that point, I think that's where a lot of distrust happens.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, and I'm really glad you went back and tweaked the comment about more honest, because you're either honest or you're not.
Exactly.
There's
Exactly.
no somewhat honest, and there's no.
Yes.
I mean, you could have a somewhat honest, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Really,
There.
yeah. Honesty has to deal
Yeah.
with no lies, no half truths, and no omissions,
Yeah.
and that's really the fullness of honesty. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you catching yourself there and
Yeah.
thinking about it. I
It's
always
it.
I always find it interesting when I'm talking with someone and they say, "Can I be honest with you?" And I'm thinking to
Exactly.
myself, "What happened? Were you not honest in the previous conversation? Like, is this now
Exactly.
the honest point? Is this when it really
So I
starts?"
don't believe anything you just said, and now you're being
Exactly.
honest.
Now we're going to
That
start.
or that or if somebody says, if I'm honest,
Yeah,
like, and it's like, okay, you're asking the question, so it's like, and it's funny because those are sayings that people say without even really realizing
yeah,
what they're
Right.
saying, right?
what
So
they're
no, I
saying.
totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, no, that's funny. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So where are we?
All right. I still want to dive into though. I think we did a great job covering the uh-oh. You've put procedures in place, things like that. But I think here's just a great spot. I want to dive into your career path to
Mhm.
ownership, just because I just want to know a little bit more about mindset that went there, the thing in front of you, like you said, because
Yeah.
we've got some emerging leaders maybe about to have their first role of people management.
Yeah.
And let's set this up beforehand
Yeah.
because what we're reading in research is that the new model for Gen Z workers is no longer working in an organization, it's franchising. It's becoming their own entrepreneur. There is a
Mm.
huge movement of individuals in this franchising sort of concept. So we know out there are people who are considering possibly to become a business owner and entrepreneur. So
Yeah.
I think that is the framing that will then help set up the question. And if you need to tee it up
And
again.
a little bit more on the idea of success is when preparedness and opportunity meet. So, like, what did you do to prepare yourself for when this opportunity arose?
Yeah.
And was it just one, oh yeah, or was there a lot of thought, and what did you have to do personally to kind of be ready for it?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things to unpack there. So I'll give you kind of the Cliff Notes version. So when I went to school originally, I actually went to Bible college for a few years. I've played music for the last 30 years, played guitar for a long time. At one point in my life, that's what I wanted to do. Wanted to do that for my job and those kind of things. Kind of got through a large portion of that and realized, like, at the time, at least this would have been back in the late 90s, early 2000s. At the time, the only way to really do that is to be on the road for a substantial amount of time, those kind of things. And got to a place where I was like, this is not really what I want. I'd rather have a family. I'd rather, whatever. And so the running joke in the AV industry in general is probably 75 to 80% of us in the AV industry all come from a music background, one way or the other. And the running joke is like, it's because we all had to get real jobs one day. Because, we all wanted to do music and music didn't work. And so we had to, find something else to do. And that's just how it worked. But it's funny because even in our company, that ratio is about accurate. There's about 75% of the company that has a music background, including myself. Right. So that's one piece of that. I think the other piece is, continually. So I think there's a lot to be said about continuing to learn. If your viewers are people who continually want to learn the next thing or learn something else, or move on to what's the next challenge, what's the next thing that I'm doing, I think that's a big portion of it. One of the things I think that everybody makes the thought of, we live in a world now that you have access to information instantly. You think that everything should potentially be able to take 30 seconds, when in reality it probably takes a year, 2 years, 5 years. Like, you never really give it that much thought. Like, yes, there are things that you can do very quickly, but at the same time, if you're going to be a true master at that thing, mastery just takes time. That's experience. That takes whatever. There's no way to bypass. If you are going to be an expert wood carver, there is not an AI to help you with that. There is not a tool that is going to help you, do that faster. There are tools that make you more efficient doing it, but the mastery of it, that's just time. That's just experience.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, one of the things that helped me a lot was, in my early career, I worked for the original in office music company, Muzak. If you've ever heard the Muzak name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so worked for them for several years in the beginning part of my career, and it forced me to have conversations with all walks of life, across from fast food restaurants to CEOs in big boardrooms, or big, whatever the deal was, because we did music and TV service for all of these people, right? And so I spent 8 years just talking to people during service calls, as well as technically troubleshooting systems. And so being able to technically troubleshoot systems to a point that I can go in and figure out what's happening with the system relatively quickly, but also go in and have a conversation with anybody from any walk of life relatively quickly. Those two skills alone, spending the better part of 8 years honing both of those skills, I think made a huge impact on the rest of the trajectory of my career at that point.
And you said that learning, continue learning. What were some of the things pre-ownership? What were the things that you did to invest into yourself to learn?
Yep.
How did you learn? How did you grow yourself?
So I'll tell you the awakening moment for me moving into bettering myself in business, bettering myself in just overall preparedness for things. I got laid off from Muzak. I started working for one of our larger clients here in town through a different company. Worked there for a little while, went to a nonprofit. Fast forward, came back to work for that large client through Cass. That's how I started with the company. When I started at that point, my income went way up because I jumped into management and was managing a lot of other people because of the technical things that I had been doing and because of the way that I interacted with people, the conversations that I could have. When they brought me back at that point, they brought me back in a management position and my income went through the roof, and it was never what I had expected. I didn't ever have that on the radar. It wasn't something that I was really looking for. And at that point, I took a pause and said, I have to figure out what I'm doing because I do not want this to become something that, you always hear stories about people getting a whole bunch of money and, going off and doing crazy stuff and buying crazy stuff and getting off into things that don't make sense. Right. But at the end of the day, like I knew like I had to figure out how to be better. So I went on a journey of learning through, reading, going through every book that I could get or study about, being financially prepared and understanding what to do with money and those kind of things. And that moved into business and reading a bunch of material and going through a bunch of videos. I've always been somebody that I always want to learn and move forward and those kind of things. And I think I'd be interesting to see what the statistics are between, so you talk about the Gen Z and how many people are going out to do their own thing and moving into entrepreneurship. I'd be interested to see, and is there a rise in cases of diagnosed ADHD as well? Because I feel like there is a correlation between being somebody who can successfully see the big picture, but who can focus intently on individual things for a period of time to master them in a way that it could take somebody else years and years and years to do. And I say master, not even necessarily master, but understand at a very high level, what does that look like? Right. Because I feel like there's definitely a correlation for me between that. I know personally in my own experience.
So a couple of things, just that when we reference, just for those who are listening, we're referencing things like correlation. We can correlate any two items together just to see if there is a statistical relationship between them, but they're not necessarily causal. So
Right.
causal will be something that has an effect on an outcome. So when we correlate, we're basically forecasting to the best of our knowledge on this item and the impact it might have on something else. So we kind of think about, oh, is there a correlation between these two items? What we're really looking for is there a causal impact between these two items. That's really the impact. And I just want to clarify that for those individuals who are listening to really, kind of understand a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I have several things that I'll comment on. One, when you talk about the number of hours to master, it's about 10,000 hours to master something. Most people don't have the rigor to do it, which is why there's very few individuals who refer to themselves or can be referred to as an expert.
Yeah.
And the important thing to know when you're actually learning to do that, the goal isn't to become the expert, it's to become an expert.
Correct.
And there's a difference in the way that article is used to describe that person from the expert. And then you also talked about like the learning, like you didn't talk about a traditional or formal way of learning. You talked about like getting your hands dirty learning, like picking up books and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos or how to do videos from other sources. So, we encourage our listeners to really do that. Not everyone is geared for a formal kind of structured education. Others can be just as smart, but they go through it at a different path. And so when we wrote the book, The Becoming a Cohesive Leader, it was to demonstrate that you could come from two different paths.
Yeah.
I have a more corporate, structured educational background, and Ben has been more of the entrepreneur, learning on his own, figuring things out, making it happen.
Lots of books, investing. I go to conferences, training my own coaches. So and we love talking about, like, to the listeners, it's the preparedness. Like, as it sounds like you may not have done the books and all that prior to getting the newer job, the most recent,
Correct.
you realize, oh my gosh, with responsibility comes great power. So I've got to learn how to do this, or the
Yeah.
other way it actually flips it around.
He just quoted
Yep.
Spider-Man,
Yep.
by the
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
Yep.
the idea that if you could start earlier, just getting one book in or 2 books in a month or whatever,
Yeah.
you're ready. You're going to see the world differently in those opportunities. And when it depends on what the books are. I mean, we're not talking the Dune series and all that, which could be great, fiction, get you, mind away for some things, but the ones that can truly make a difference in the bottom line of your household,
Yeah.
right? You then interact with people differently. Like it could be a random how you interact with somebody on the street that gets you your
Yeah.
next opportunity, but you wouldn't do it if you didn't see this is the best way to do it from a book. So
Yeah, if you didn't have the knowledge to back it up, you're absolutely right on that. I think there's a lot of things there. I'll give you some cliff notes on some of this stuff. The Next Conversation by Jefferson Fisher, fantastic,
just listen to it.
fantastic book on communication. Super Communicators, Charles Duhigg, that's another fantastic book on communicating. Beyond Entrepreneurship, either version 1 or 2.0. That's by Jim Collins. That's a fantastic book. Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara is a phenomenal book. If you are in that demographic of people that you're talking about in their 20s or 30s, everybody, whether you follow it or not, I feel like everybody should go and at least read through Dave Ramsey's book on finances. Not because I think or agree with necessarily every single thing in there, but it is a very simple path and it is a very easy and workable path. It's not easy from the standpoint of actually following through with it, but it's easy from understanding like what it actually does. Like there's a whole other piece there. Could go on and on these. All of the Alex Hormozy books on business are great. Pat Lencioni, anything from Pat Lencioni. One of the ones that, like, if you want to own a business, if you really want to understand business ownership and understand what it's going to take and those kind of things, The Motive by Pat Lencioni is a fantastic book, phenomenal book.
Super.
There's a lot of things that you can take out of there. I think some of the things that people always think is it's going to be glamorous. I'm going to be able to schedule my own time and do all the things that I want to do, and those kind of things. And it doesn't always end up working that way. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it's definitely, there's a mentality and there's a drive behind it that you need to make sure that you at least think about before you get into it, for sure.
Jeff, thank you so much. You've given us such a wealth of information. How do folks get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Price. You can find the company, Communications Advisory Service, CAS for short. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all those places. Also on X as well. So any of those.
Okay, super. And then we also like to just tease our guests with this question. So as you were thinking about coming onto the show today, what question did you think we would ask that we didn't?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I honestly don't know if there is one that I would have kind of thought about ahead of time. Having had a few of these different conversations like this before, I mean, everybody's kind of got their own different questions that they like to ask. So if I would narrow it down to one, I'd say probably something more based around, how did I get into the business that I'm in now? But I guess we kind of talked about that a little bit. So, but yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for being a part of the show. And
yeah,
we like to close all of this episode as well as all of our cohesion culture programs with this particular mantra. You don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.